The Germans had been up on those rises you can see there. They had been there almost 4 years.
That's right.
They were well prepared with wooden fortifications and trenches.
The Americans came from behind there?
Yes.
And they took that path there?
Yes. And there were 1.5 divisions, probably well prepared and well dug in, just waiting for the enemy. It's extraordinary because if a German shell fell on that area, it was certain to kill Americans because they were so tightly packed together.
On October 7th, 1918, the American Army moves into the village of Châtel-Chehery in the Ardennes. The Sammies occupy the ruins and observe the enemy. It's the eve of the battle. The attack is due to be launched at dawn. A native of Tennessee, Alvin York is still unknown, but tomorrow he will become the best-known American hero of the First World War. Several miles away, on the same day, another soldier, Joseph Oklahombi, will experience a similar destiny. But the exploits of this Choctaw soldier will not be widely known. With the help of these rarely seen images, we are going to tell you the extraordinary stories of these two men. At the beginning of 1917, Germany launches a ferocious submarine campaign. In the English Channel, the U-boats sink all commercial vessels, creating a blockade to bring down the UK economy and destroy morale. The German Navy torpedoes an American merchant ship. One more incident in an increasingly tense diplomatic context, which is shifting the USA closer to war. President Wilson takes note of the resolution in Congress. On April 6, 1917, the USA enters the war alongside France, Great Britain, and Russia. In June, there are just a few thousand American soldiers who land at Saint-Nazaire and in Boulogne. Their commander-in-chief, General John Pershing, knows that it will take months to create an operational army. The regular American Army and the National Guard amount to only 300,000 men, and they are not well armed. On July 14th, Paris gives a hero's welcome to these Sammies, the sons of Uncle Sam. Lafayette, here we are, proclaims Captain Stanton on the tomb of the hero of the two worlds. Conscription around the country mobilizes hundreds of thousands of young Americans between the ages of 21 and 31. Civilians who will have to learn the art of war at the double. Pershing has requested that 1 million soldiers be shipped out to France as soon as possible. Alvin York prepares. At 29 years of age, this modest farmer will leave his mother, his village, and his own country to go abroad for the very first time.
This is Pall Mall, Tennessee. This is a valley, they call it the Valley of the Three Forks of the Wolf. This is where my grandfather was born and raised, and this is where he wanted to come back to. This was the birthplace of my grandfather.
Since the death of his father, Alvin York has been the head of the family and has helped his mother raise his brothers and sisters. As all the young men in the country, Alvin is an excellent hunter.
It is what it is, Robin.
Every Sunday, there is a shooting contest in the village. The tradition is to use the long .54 caliber rifles from the American Civil War.
York was known as a great shot. He competed at local shoots, but he also had developed some bad habits as a result of the death of his father, and perhaps even before that. And he liked his drink, he liked to carouse, he liked to gamble, he liked to fight.
He wanted to date my grandmother, and her parents did not want her to see him because he was kind of a hellraiser, and they didn't want her going out with him.
Was it love or the loss of a close friend in a brawl that led to Alvin York's conversion? The young man reforms, leaving the bars to attend the Methodist chapel. When he joins up, his new faith causes him a crisis of conscience.
This is Jesus, the prophet of Nazareth of Galilee.
Well, the Church of Christ of Christian Union said that you can't fight. You know, the fighting's wrong, killing's wrong. And he's in a quandary. And so he goes to see the pastor, Pastor Roser Pyle, who was a good friend of his, and asks him what he should do. And Pastor Pyle tells him to apply for an exemption.
If you look at his draft card, when they sent a draft card to him, he sent it back in. He said, down at the bottom, he said, don't want to fight. He felt like killing was wrong. The Bible says, thou shalt not kill. And he took that literally and felt like he did not want to kill.
As a conscientious objector, but also a patriot, Alvin York decides to join up, but he expects to be posted to the rear as a non-combatant. But during his training at Camp Gordon in Georgia, he is quickly spotted as an excellent shot. The new army needs this soldier.
The Army gave him structure and purpose. And so, according to George Edward Buxton, who, Major Buxton and Colonel Buxton, who was one of the folks who took a real interest in York, Buxton said that York was a model soldier. Buxton convinces York that he should fight.
Like York, hundreds of thousands of young Americans have been called up and traveled to France. The full diversity of this young emigrant country is represented. In Oklahoma, the Native American Choctaw Nation prepares to send its sons to the war. At 22 years of age, Joseph Oklahombi is keen to join up. Most Native Americans are still not considered to be American citizens, but they answer the call.
He walked 22 miles to the nearest enlistment office from Wright City to Idabel, and he said, I want to volunteer. He didn't wait to be called into service. He actually he didn't have a car at the time, so he literally walked 22 miles and said, put me in the service, I want to protect my country.
In order to be called a warrior, it was necessary to go to war. But Native American wars had come to an end. The Great War provided young men with an opportunity to gain a name as a warrior. There were also economic reasons for going to war, because in Oklahoma, in Native American territory, there were few resources.
The Choctaw speak their own native language amongst themselves. It is a language that has been forbidden by the government, but which would turn out to be useful for coding messages and tricking the enemy.
So when the commanding officer heard our Choctaw men talking in our own native language, they hit upon this idea. Hey, maybe we can send messages in that language and the Germans won't know what it was. And fortunately, it worked.
Choctaw became the language used for coding messages sent between the command posts and the front line. Those employed for this work were known as code talkers. President Wilson kept his word. Thousands of young Americans arrive in France every day. The English and the French teach them about trench warfare. Training is brief, sometimes lasting only 7 weeks, because the general staff need the reinforcements fast. Allied troops are exhausted. In spring 1917, mutiny breaks out in French regiments. The German army is also at the end of its tether. The spring and summer offensives have not managed to make a breach in the front, and the entry of the USA in the war saps the morale of the German troops even more.
The Germans are extremely tired and hungry. This has been the case since 1916, and now, in 1918, the situation is critical. The great offensives carried out by the Germans between March and July 1918 have led to the loss of between 500 and 700,000 lives. Losses are appalling. They have risked all, but have not succeeded in breaking through.
Woodrow Wilson has set out his conditions. The Americans will have to fight in their own army. General Foch, however, wants to include them in his regiments in order to fight alongside the French, but Pershing is inflexible. Even at the risk of sending inexperienced troops to the front, the first clashes seem to prove Foch right. In spring 1918, the 26th American Division is rooted in the village of Seicheprey. But in September, the American troops win their first major victory at the salient of Saint-Mihiel. Pershing declares that he now has a real army. He wants his troops to participate in the next major offensive. This will take place between Meuse and Argonne. The objective is to break through the lines towards Mézières and Sedan in order to seize the railway line which supplies the German troops on the Western Front. The Germans have reinforced this vital part of their defense line. It is necessary to cross 3 successive lines, including the famous Hindenburg Line.
We are in the German trench above the Côte d'Armorié, which is in blocks in order to provide protection from exploding shells. You can see the zigzags there, and the stones they put up there to protect themselves from bullets. Yes, to provide protection from bullets. You can see the steps to get up there. There were grenades up there, ammunition, machine guns, all scattered about. Around the hill, there were about 20 blockhouses, but in the village of Romagny, there were 32. We are behind the main front, and when the Germans retreat, they come to the Hindenburg Line, which they had built by prisoners in 1917, mostly Russians, as well as French citizens from the village. So behind the main front, they construct this third line of defense. Thick networks of barbed wire, blockhouses, crossfire from the artillery. They have been there since September 1914. They know the terrain very well, and the Americans will have to reach this railway line. They have 50 kilometers to cover. They will have to cross 3 major lines of defense prepared by the Germans between 1916 and 1918.
An unprecedented offensive is being prepared. In the mud and the rain, there is constant movement of men and material filling the roads of Meuse-Argonne. Tanks, horses, gas, fuel, drinking water. There is a huge amount to transport. Not to mention the munitions. The depots contain 40,000 tons of shells of all calibers just for the first day of the offensive. 2,795 cannons, 821 planes, and 318 tanks have been assembled for the attack. And lastly, the men. On the eve of the offensive, there were 400,000 men, concentrated over just 30 kilometers of the front. They will take on 70,000 Germans, who are well established in their lines.
The Meuse-Argonne campaign kicks off on 26 September 1918, and it's the biggest ever in American history to this day attack. Now, this is one thing that we need to be clear about. This is a multinational operation. It's a fact. There's going to be 2,775 guns opening the salvo to support the American attack. Actually, on the 25th of September, the artillery starts firing. Half of those guns are French crews, French officers and NCOs firing in support of the American attack. Many of the tanks attacking the battlefield here are crewed by Frenchmen. Many of the airplanes flown over the American heads here are flown by Frenchmen. Of course, there's American pilots and American tankers as well, but it's a Franco-American endeavor.
The offensive is launched, and the first line is breached quickly. The second holds out. On the Montfaucon-Butte, the 79th Division takes the village, but suffers significant losses. Amidst offensives and counterattacks, the troops advance about 10 kilometers. Dug in a number of different locations along the front, the Germans hold firm. After 5 days of combat, the American army has lost some 23,000 men. Pershing decides to strike out towards the west in order to clear the forest of Argonne, where part of the enemy artillery is based. It is during this attack that Corporal Alvin York arrives in the village of Châtel-Chéhéry. The Germans, who have occupied this position since 1914, retreat to their hills and lie in wait for the enemy.
Imagine you're an American soldier in the 82nd Division coming towards this hill with German artillery observers on it, German machine gunners, German sharpshooters, and you're being engaged with poisonous gas on top of all the other fun stuff. You got to put on your mask. You have to cross that canal that we drove over, then cross over the Air River. And the engineers had nicely laid some planks across it, 2x4s across, and you got to try to waddle across. Half of the guys are falling into that mess, like, great, fantastic. And then you're not even in the action yet. And you're moving up the hill, and you're promised a barrage before the attack, and the barrage never comes.
The attack is launched at 6 a.m. on October 8th. The American troops come down from Hill 223 into an open valley. Caught in the crossfire of the 2nd Landwehr Division, 60 men are killed rapidly. Command decides to change tactics. Sergeant Early, who commands 17 soldiers, including York, receives the order to go behind German lines and to take out the machine gun nest on the left flank.
So the 17 Americans are meandering behind German lines, and it takes them about an hour to move this far, not that far, but they're going Indian style, and they finally make it to over here.
And so the 17 men work their way around the hill and down towards the little creek when they are seen by Germans who are eating their breakfast.
Fleeing nurses lead them directly to the command post of a German unit. They took 70 prisoners, but on the hill, a machine gun is trained on them.
And so the machine gunners turn the machine gun, instead of towards American lines, they turn them back towards their own lines so that they can take out these intruders. When the machine gunners open up, they kill 8 men, Murray Savage being one of them, because Murray Savage is over on that left flank. On the right flank, you've got the hill. And so York and others take cover. There are 7 survivors, including York.
And York is now in command of this bunch of 7 survivors, plus the 3 wounded, plus 70 prisoners, and there's machine gun fire over his head. What do you do? And this is the same guy just moments before said, I'm not sure I can kill for my country. He knows what to do. He charges up this hill behind me. He goes to the flank of the German machine gun position, and there's also German infantrymen there, and he kills 19. While he's shooting these Germans, he's asking them to surrender. And they don't surrender. So he kills all 19 of them.
They have to deal with this sniper. 6 men come out of the trench and attack, but York shoots them one by one with his pistol. A German officer requests a ceasefire.
York takes prisoners, and as they are moving forward, Paul Vollmer, who was the German lieutenant, it turns out that he'd been studying in the United States. He'd been going to college in the United States. His English was quite good. In fact, York said his English was probably better than his. And so York tells Vollmer to surrender. And by the time they get to the command post, they have 132 German prisoners.
York has not acted alone, but his exceptional courage has made all the difference. Tales of his heroism will soon spread throughout America. Like York, many soldiers come face to face with their destiny and act with remarkable courage. But they are often forgotten. Several kilometers from there, on the same day, October 8th, to the west of Argonne, the battle is raging, and Joseph Oklahombi of the 141st Infantry Regiment is close to the village of Saint-Étienne-à-Arnes in the Ardennes.
This is the route in Saint-Étienne-à-Arnes, followed by Joseph Oklahombi. You just have to follow the road.
And there were trenches down there.
Yes, but those are German defense trenches. It's the German defense, but it was recovered by the Americans. There, on the 3rd German line of defense, the German soldiers are waiting for them, even if there aren't many of them and they are starving. They know the terrain. They are dug in. They have had time to establish themselves and to arrange the terrain to their advantage. The Americans arrive. They don't know the sector at all, and they are a little lost. The only protection they have is in their strength of numbers.
The 36th Division comes to relieve the 2nd, who have shown their worth in the taking of Blanc-Mont Ridge. At 5:30, Oklahombi and 20 other soldiers are sent to scout out the outlying parts of the village.
Joseph Oklahombi and his comrades arrive at night in order to avoid being seen and exposed to enemy fire. They see they have no protection. They arrive at a place they don't know and which has not been prepared by the American army, as it is still advancing.
The squad spots something happening in a house. They burst into the garden and find that it is a campaign hospital. The house is still there today. The owners have kept documents dating from the time.
You can see the sign on the facade, Hauptverbenplatz, with the flag of the Red Cross and the front of the house, with the little wall and the grill, which aren't there anymore.
This hospital plays a key role in the German defenses. There were passageways dug out by the German soldiers under the house, a veritable network, which made it possible to get to all parts of the village and to the trenches under cover.
Here we are at the center of the underground system with passageways, which lead to the orchard to the north of the house. Then you get to another part on the left, and then you can set off to the right, and you come out on the high street in the village.
The Americans find themselves cut off from their command and exposed to enemy fire. Oklahombi organizes a full-blown resistance. He evacuates prisoners to the rear, launches an assault on the machine gun nests, and then turns the guns on enemy lines. The fighting will last for 4 days.
The soldiers cannot advance. They are blocked. There is crossfire from automatic weapons, and the French are not advancing. They will have to wait until September 9th, 10th, even 11th before the village is fully liberated.
And they managed to cross no man's land about 200 meters, and they stormed an enemy encampment and took over about 50 machine guns and held that position on their enemy. They continued to fire upon the enemy in spite of being fired upon back. They crossed no man's land many times to help wounded comrades to bring information back on the enemy.
Seizing and holding this position contributes to the liberation of the village. There are a total of 171 prisoners recorded by command. This feat is as exceptional as that of Sergeant York. It is specific acts of bravery such as these which contribute to the success of the Meuse-Argonne offensive. As they gradually push back the enemy, the Americans come across German command posts. The battle lasts 47 days, from September 26th to the armistice on November 11th. The First Army lost 117,000 men. The German side is estimated to have lost 100,000 men, and 26,000 prisoners were taken. On 12 November, Pershing decorates his friend General Pétain with the Distinguished Service Medal at Senlis. Soon to be Marshal of France, Pétain congratulates Pershing. This victory also belongs to him. A true army has been created under his command. It is a time of glory and medals for all of those who demonstrated their courage on the field of battle. Sergeant York will have to wait to receive his honors. In February 1919, he returns to the terrain with a commission of inquiry. The General Staff want to ensure that the extraordinary exploit which made the front pages of American newspapers really happened.
We would not know about York had it not been for a reporter named George Patullo. Patullo was visiting hospitals, and he comes across two of the guys who got wounded. They tell Patullo that they've been involved in this engagement where they were wounded, but a whole bunch of German prisoners had been captured. And so Patullo seeks out York. If you read the after-action reports on about October the 8th, York's not mentioned. I mean, York does not show up in those after-action reports that were filed by York's commanders. It would be highly possible that we would know nothing about Alvin York.
At the place where it took place, Alvin York will say to General Lindsay, "Sir, it is not manpower. A higher power than manpower guided and watched over me and told me what to do."
And it always bothered him that he had taken lives. And he asked my father, who was a minister, he said, "What do you think God will think when I get to judgment about me taking lives?" So it was something that he thought about all of his life, was that he had taken someone's life. And he had, when asked what made him decide, he said that they were killing all of his friends and all of his comrades. And somebody had to do something. So what he did to stop the killing, not to kill more, but to stop the killing so less people would die.
York's feat is validated. Promoted to sergeant, he receives the Medal of Honor, the highest American military distinction. France awards him the Croix de Guerre. The war has now finished. Alsace and Lorraine are returned to France and thank America for putting an end to 4 interminable years of war. In spring 1919, the Sammies return home. They left home as inexperienced civilians. They returned to New York as conquering heroes. York is a national hero. The modest farmer from Tennessee seems somewhat overcome by his newfound fame. The war has unified the country. A new era is beginning for the United States of America. On Fifth Avenue, America is victorious, and with America, her Senior General, John Pershing. Darling of a triumphant America, a new life starts for Alvin York. Installed in a suite in a luxury hotel, he holds court to visitors from the world of politics. Everybody wants to be photographed with the hero, but York only has thoughts of returning to Pall Mall. He wants to go home, to his mother, and above all, to Gracie, the girl he promised to marry.
And when he came back, he was in New York. And so he was in large cities, which he was not used to at all. So he was very anxious to get back to Pall Mall and the lifestyle here. He came back in May, and they were married on the 7th of June. So it was very quick.
Joseph Oklahombi also goes home. In February 1919, he receives the Croix de Guerre by direct command of Marshal Pétain. America honors him with the Silver Star, but his return to Oklahoma passes off without a parade or bands. Like most of his Choctaw brothers in arms, he will never speak of the war.
most of the time, they didn't speak about it. They were very humble men, and they were so glad just to get home to their families. They wanted to go back to a normal life. And in fact, Joseph Oklahombi had visitors from Hollywood that wanted to make a movie about his life. They were willing to pay him to come to Hollywood and make a movie, but he said no.
Hollywood also comes knocking at Alvin York's door. Like Oklahombi, the sergeant turns down all offers. No film, no book of his exploits, no advertising. He will not make a cent out of his time in uniform. He does, however, accept the offer from the Nashville Rotary Club to buy him a piece of land where he can set up home with his family. As he builds his farm, York will work on a project which is dear to his heart.
When Alvin comes home from the war, Alvin was a changed man. He still has his faith. He still has his drive, if you will. But the man's perspective has changed. But he still can't forget everything that he's seen. He looks around him and he says, look, guys, the world has passed us by. You know, we could use roads, we could use electricity, we could use doctors and hospitals. But he fixates on this idea that education is needed above all else, that without that, we know nothing about the rest of the world. We have no way to better ourselves or our children.
He will found a school to fight against child illiteracy, a school which will be accessible to all.
So everybody wanted to know what actually happened. Can you talk to us? And so he found that if he talked about the war, people gave more money for him to build the school.
He throws himself into speaking tours to raise money to construct the building and pay the teachers. He expects a subsidy from the state to buy school buses, but this never materializes, so he doesn't hesitate to mortgage his farm on 2 occasions. The adventure lasts for about 10 years, but finally, tired of chasing after money, he resigns himself to donating the school to the state.
He ended up making a deal with the state and gave them 400 acres, gave them the building, gave them the buses, gave them everything. And they made him the president emeritus with no authority at the school.
In the farm at Pall Mall, his family has grown. Alvin and Gracie have 8 children. Reporters often come to bear witness to the new life of the hero. He uses his fame to develop the local area, to get credit to construct roads and make villages accessible, to develop and then direct a national park.
In 1936, he's approached to be a spokesman for pacifism, because in 1936, the Spanish Civil War starts. And, you know, Hitler's on the rise. But in 1938, he starts changing his tune. And so we have York, who had been a hellraiser, then a pacifist, then a warrior, now a pacifist again. I think that's one of the reasons York has been so hard to interpret over time, because they want this simplistic guy, and he's not simple at all. He's complicated. He's complex. He's contradictory. And that, I think, is more, I think the real York is far more interesting than the heroic version of York.
World War II is declared. At 54, Alvin York requests permission to serve. Overweight and suffering from diabetes, he can no longer fight at the front. He is appointed colonel. At his own expense, he visits training camps and raises funds for the war effort. Initially shy, Alvin York is now a practiced orator. From Knoxville, Tennessee, he takes part in radio broadcasts to mobilize the population.
Listen, please. We are fighting for life itself. Thou shalt not kill is written in the Bible. Here in America, we've always tried to follow that commandment. Our enemies have denied us the right to follow it.
York finally agrees to his exploits being made into a film. He asks the producer Jesse Lasky for his role to be played by Gary Cooper.
Hey, Alvin! Well, he cleaned out that machine gun nest.
Absolutely. It's absolutely a propaganda film. Harry Warner was Jewish. Warner Brothers was the first studio to quit doing business with Germany. He visited in 1933. He was in negotiations to buy UFA studio. And when he went to Germany and saw what Hitler was up to, he said, we can't do business with these people. Sergeant York is not so much about World War I as it is getting Americans ready to fight in World War II.
Produced by Howard Hawks, the film is a huge success. Nominated for 11 Oscars, the Academy awards Gary Cooper the Oscar for Best Actor. After the war, York remains faithful to his convictions. He donates the money made from the film to founding a new school, this time for high school students.
What he wanted to do is, he had the high school that he had built in the 20s, and that was for kids to go through and get a high school education. But what he really wanted was something after that, trade school, something beyond high school that would give the kids a trade. Seeing Paris, being in France, being in New York City, really opened his eyes to there's a bigger world. And for our kids and grandkids to be competitive in that world, they need an education. So that is what really pushed him to come back and build a high school and push for education.
In this victorious America, York remains a symbol. Received at the White House with his family, decorated more than 50 times, Alvin York responds to all invitations, playing the role of national hero as if it was his duty. Every time he receives a new award, he seems to apologize for being given all these honors.
I accept this not only for myself, but for all of my buddies who were in the World War. I thank you.
Away from the limelight, Joseph Oklahombi leads a humble and anonymous family life with his wife Agnes and son Jonah. Nobody speaks to him about his feats in the Ardennes. The forgotten hero has left no written record of his war service.
They probably got on her nerves.
His heirs have only inherited some rare documents and photos.
Yes, in the nursing home.
She must have just went there.
He didn't talk about it a lot, they said, other than with the men of the congregation and stuff. They didn't have a lot. He didn't say a lot about it. If you ask him a question, he would answer it, but, it was something that he was proud of it, but he just didn't like to talk about it.
That was before.
Judy Allen is compiling records for a dossier about the soldier. The Choctaw Nation would like him to be awarded the Medal of Honor.
Oh, this is Joyce's favorite photo.
And then the one with him sitting on a log, and I don't think we have it.
I've seen that one too.
I have the original in my safe at the house.
His hair looks good, his hands are dark, and he's so proud. And I know he was a very humble man. But
The family of the soldier may be able to provide her with some new items to make up the dossier.
Whatever, and it was released.
One thing I thought was unique about the service as Coach Hawkers is this was a time when students that were Choctaw were being sent to boarding schools and being punished for talking Choctaw. And here we sent guys over there that were being celebrated for talking Choctaw because they helped win the war.
Just a simple person.
There are numerous initiatives to bring him wider recognition. High school students are working to compile the necessary evidence to obtain the medal. Unfortunately, their research in military archives has not yet yielded the desired results.
And the requirements from the Army is that you have to have 2 eyewitness accounts. The one eyewitness account we have was given to a gentleman in the area by a gentleman that did not read or write English, so we were able to get it secondary, but we have to have another one.
In 1924, the Indian Citizenship Act finally permitted all Native Americans to obtain American citizenship. Oklahombi's act of bravery and that of all Native American combatants did much to contribute to this recognition. But American society was not ready to award a Medal of Honor to a Native American.
We weren't always treated as human a lot of times. I saw a lot of injustice. He probably wasn't looked upon as being anybody important or him having done anything important. So at this day and time, it's important to me and to his family that he does get the Congressional Medal of Honor.
A wrong which the elected chief of the Choctaw Nation is keen to fight.
He is our hero. I mean, he what represents us. And so I'm not doing my just duty if I did not fight for Joseph Oklahombi. I think it would be a lost story. It's lost for our nation if we do not stand up for Joseph Oklahombi and what he has done for us.
On 13 April 1960, Joseph Oklahombi was run down at the side of the road, just a few steps from his home. He died at the age of 64. After 2 strokes and a cerebral hemorrhage, Alvin York was bedridden for the last 10 years of his life. He continued to receive the visits of veterans and admirers who made the trip to Pall Mall to spend a few moments with their hero.
Initially, he was just a great grandfather. I mean, he was fantastic, jovial, kidded. He was just a great grandfather, what a typical great grandfather should be. His life definitely was an example, probably why I went in the military. He was a great role model. He was a great man. Character, morals, integrity, a great person. One to anybody would aspire to be like.
Alvin York died on September 2nd, 1964, and received the honors of the American people for the last time. The forest has grown back between Meuse and Argonne. Where the battle raged, the traces of the Great War continue to come to the surface 100 years later. War archaeologists have been able to identify the exact places where York's feats took place. 2 digs have brought to light undeniable proof of the presence of the 328th Infantry Regiment.
Here is a selection of some of the remains found in the Argonne forest. Tins containing reasonably well-conserved bandages for wounded soldiers have been found. All these objects have been found during digs after the war. And 100 years later, they are still present in the terrain.
Aren't all the young Americans who came to fight in Meuse-Argonne also heroes, like Alvin York and Joseph Oklahombi? Don't the 14,000 soldiers laid to rest in the cemetery at Romain-sur-Montfaucon also deserve glory and honors? The courage of all these young Sammies helped to stop this bloody, seemingly interminable war.
You know, the story of York is truly something worth telling, not only because it gives us hope, but also because of the difference it made in World War I. This action by this good-for-nothing drunk from nowhere, Tennessee, changed the course of history in France because his action forced the Germans out of the Argonne forest. And I believe it helped to end the war sooner.
How York was chosen to be the hero of the war, there's a bit of politics involved. Because World War I is the war that really brings Americans back together. World War I unified Americans in a way that we hadn't been unified since the Civil War. I admire York not because of what he did on the battlefield. I admire York for what he did after the war. I mean, I think that's when he becomes a real hero, when he puts his family's life in jeopardy to pay teachers' salaries. That's commitment.